All right, now that he's recording, welcome in. Is this the Devil's Illustrated podcast? Is that what we're going to call this? Anyways, whatever we want to call it, it's a different medium because you can see us this time. Happy quarantining. I'm Daron Vaught. He's Brian McLawhorn, publisher, editor extraordinaire of devilsillustrated.com for Yahoo Sports and Rivals. And I guess you just wanted to get the band back together. Where's Clint Jackson in all this? That's my question. We got to get everybody in on it.
Yeah, no joke. Clint's probably, who knows what he's doing. He's sitting in Richmond, Virginia right now. Who knows, watching old school baseball or something, or reliving his Washington Nationals championship. He reminds me of all that every time we talk. So, but yeah, man, the band.
I was watching Korean baseball earlier today as we're recording this. So that's not something I expected I would be doing months ago, you know?
No, I mean, we get our sports fix how we get it. But, you know, I mean, we only have so many opportunities. I watched the 1995 Braves World Series run. So,
Love that.
God, I mean, of course, I haven't had a World Series run really to watch otherwise since. So, but, yeah, man, the band needed to be back. It's been, I don't know, 3 years since we've done a podcast together.
We've brought it back like intermittently. We haven't consistently done a podcast in 4 years, probably.
Yeah.
But it's been brought back here and there. I'm trying to remember when the last time we would have done something. I mean, I've been pulled in a million different directions. So have you. So it's just been kind of weird to schedule things. It was a lot easier when we were living in the same place too. Right. That's got a lot to do with it. But
that helped. No, I mean we could do like the 11 p.m. podcast, you know, like it didn't matter back then. Now it's a little different.
That's what I'm finding is that it's funny in that we're supposed to be more limited with these self-quarantines and things like that. But there's a way of working around them, right? I have a newfound flexibility that I've never had before, that I can record an 11 p.m. podcast interview for another project if I want to, and I'm flexible to do that. So it has created some opportunities for as many as it's taken away.
This is true, but you know, I wish it would quit taking away live sports, because I would like to talk about live sports rather than what's happened in the past.
Yeah, for sure. Other than spinning out golden content with recent Duke signees, what has publisher-editor Brian McLawhorn been doing with his time?
Oh, man. I've been trying to be creative and hoping that other recruits will respond to our text messages. That's what I've been doing. Spending more time on the phone, text messaging than I ever have before. That's pretty much my life these days.
There you go. Yeah, no, that's the gist of it. As a longtime sports radio producer, you know that I know what you're talking about. I get it. I
do.
Well, let's talk about games that later this year, hopefully, are going to happen, right? With the Duke Blue Devils, they, of course, have so many NBA draft goers as they usually do. And you and I have talked about the small core of returning guys, although it's, in comparison to past years, it doesn't seem terribly small. It seems kind of average, right? Because you've got Jordan Goldwire is going to be back as a senior. Joey Baker as a junior will be back. And then the two sophomores, Wendell Moore and Matthew Hurt. Handful of incoming new freshmen. And the outlook for Duke, including or not including a transfer from Columbia as well. How much different is Duke going to look from year to year? Because I think, you know, from year to year, the centerpieces often change quickly in this one and done era. But Wendell Moore's going to be back, and he showed a lot of progress throughout the season for the Blue Devils this past year. Jeremy Roach, assumedly, hopefully, is going to be just sort of a plug-and-play fill-in for Trey Jones at point guard. And then you've got a mix of bigs and swings coming in to where, I don't know, stylistically, is it going to change that much?
I really don't think so. I think really the last class or last season and then this class are going to be very similar in that it's more balanced. There's more depth. That's something we talked about a lot with last season's class, despite how dominant Vernon Carey was, because he was incredible. And then, of course, how crucial Trey Jones was, being that leader and being a guy who had experienced it all the year before. It was still a pretty balanced team. You could count on a different guy stepping up each night. We saw it with Cassius Stanley. We saw it with Wendell Moore. We saw Jordan Goldwire step up. We saw Joey Baker have his moment. We saw Alex O'Connell have his moments. It was just across the board. And, Duke played 10 deep at times. So I think it's going to be a very similar thing that we see next year if we get to play basketball, particularly with Wendell Moore and Matthew Hurt coming back. Have one of those guys, gone on to the pros. It would be a little bit different and more like, maybe still more like last year, but then maybe previous years where you lose 4 guys to the NBA. But I'm excited about the team. I think they've got the same makeup to be a championship caliber team because of that balance and that depth. Sure, this past season, Duke had a few bumps in the roads. They lost a few games that they probably shouldn't have lost. But they still, to me, were a team that would have been really in position to win a championship. So I think this team is going to be very similar in that they've got a lot of pieces that can be intermingled with one another. The post will be a little different because, Vernon Carey, you knew you had that dominant presence. Mark Williams, you don't know exactly what you're going to get because he's a freshman. He's not that Vernon Carey type of player, but he is a pretty solid force. And so we'll see what happens. Jeremy Roach has to pick up where maybe Trey Jones left off, but we'll see what happens.
How valuable do you consider the fallback option at point guard with Goldwire coming back as a senior? I mean, we see it year to year. The attrition is just more and more in especially a conference like the ACC, where you don't have a lot of experience in backcourts. It's hard to come by. And Goldwire has shown progress year over year to a point where, he's obviously was very productive in his niche way this past year. And there's chance for improvement to where, he could be a huge impact player for Duke next season. I don't know how you gauge it. You've been more plugged in, obviously, than I have in recent years. But do you see an opportunity for Goldwire to really break out as a senior?
I absolutely do. I love Jordan Goldwire. I would probably rate him as the most improved player for Duke last year, and maybe one of the top 3-4 most improved players in the ACC last year. Because here's a guy that absolutely accepts his role, understands his role, is primed for big moments. He's not afraid of the pressure and the big moments. You couldn't have said that 2 years ago, but he really embraced big pressure-packed moments, and he didn't falter in those situations. You could count on him late in the game, and we saw that with Coach K playing him multiple times in the final minutes of big games, of close games, because he trusted him. So I think Jordan Goldwire's presence is as important as anybody's, particularly with Jeremy Roach coming in and being like, first a freshman point guard that's got to be that guy, that the floor general, the guy that gets the offense going. But I don't think all the pressure has to be on his shoulders because Jordan Goldwire can play alongside him and really alleviate some of that. And I think Clint and I, we were talking, I think there might have been a thread on the Duke message board, premium message board a couple weeks ago. And Duke and Clint and I were talking about Duke's idea of who the starters might be. And I think Clint did a mailbag. Somebody had asked him a question, and he labeled, if I remember correctly, Jeremy Roach, Wendell Moore, Jalen Johnson, Matthew Hurt, and maybe Mark Williams, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't have it in front of me. But I told him when we were discussing it, I said, I wouldn't sleep on Jordan Goldwire getting that starting position, not in place of Roach, but maybe running that same Roach Jordan Goldwire scenario that we saw with Trey Jones and Jordan Goldwire. I don't know. I mean, but I think he is going to be crucial, and he will be the team leader. He'll be a captain. I'm almost certain that'll be a situation. And I'm telling you, I compare that maturity obviously to Quinn Cook. I mean, obviously Quinn Cook was a different caliber player.
Well, stylistically too, they're just different players.
Absolutely. But from that maturity standpoint, that growth, because that's what we saw with Quinn Cook from his freshman year to his senior year, how he grew as a leader, how he grew to play within a system, how he grew to harness his skill set and make his teammates better. I think Jordan Goldwire is very similar in that regard and will be big for Duke next year. It'll be fun to watch him as a senior.
That Quinn Cook comparison actually just reminded me. I think the last time we did one of these podcasts, of course, minus the video component, I think we interviewed Quinn for it. It's been a few years for sure, but I think we included a Quinn interview. So that's kind of funny that for whatever reason that rejogged my memory. Before we get to the new guys, quickly on a couple of sophomores who were part of a highly touted freshman class. Now, it was well established prior to the campaign that this was not Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, Cam Reddish type of a freshman class, but it was still really good. And it was maybe even better in the sense that they meshed more ideally. Wendell Moore, who could have easily been at the beginning of the year projected as a one-and-done guy, is going to be back. Matthew Hurt, who by recruiting rankings was the best of all of them coming into his freshman season with the Blue Devils, and I guess kind of rode some peaks and valleys. What do you see coming out of those two in year number 2? Because they're both guys with a lot of potential that sort of got at times just lost in the mix, as typically happens with a loaded Duke freshman class.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll start with Wendell Moore. He's a guy that, he battled some injuries along the way that derailed some progress that he was making. He had a pretty tough stretch for a couple weeks where he didn't really contribute a lot, but toward the end of the season, you started to see him find himself again. And it's funny, we did when Cassius Stanley was doing his NBA announcement press conference with media, he spoke about Wendell Moore and said that people really didn't get to see his full capabilities because he didn't have the opportunity to show his full range of skills. And he said, be ready because I think you'll have a big year. And I absolutely buy into that because one thing that sticks out to me with Wendell Moore is his versatility on both sides of the ball. But I think back to the Wake Forest game. At Wake Forest, I believe is the game that I'm thinking of. He attacked the basket. And we had not seen him like that all season to the degree where plays were being drawn up for him. He was kind of the go-to guy. And he kept Duke in that game, gave him a shot to derail that incredible game that Wake Forest put together toward the end of the game. But that showed a versatility with Wendell. He needs to still improve his shooting and be more of a threat on the perimeter, and that'll improve his what he can do on the floor and kind of keep defenses on their heels. But defensively, it's huge because you get him and Jordan Goldwire, who are two excellent defenders. And Wendell Moore's got that ability to defend, 4 different positions. He can guard the 1, he can guard the 4, and the 2 and the 3. I mean, he's so versatile. So I think we will probably see a guy that's going to be more confident, that can be a pretty big impact player next season. With Matthew Hurt, I'm not going to go down this trail too far, but I have been the guy. I've probably been the most outspoken critic of Matthew Hurt. And since he was a recruit and through last year. But I've tried to explain too, because he didn't have the kind of year. I mean, we're talking about a guy that was a 5-star player. He had every blue blood in the country wanting him. He's highly skilled. Everybody felt like he was potentially a one and done type player. just tremendous ability, off the charts ability, high basketball IQ. But for me, I'd seen him play probably 12 times in high school through like AAU events, NBA Top 100, USA Basketball. And I had seen him maybe twice play well. I'd seen throughout the other games maybe some flashes here and there. But what I saw was he didn't have quite the toughness. He was a little slow. He didn't have the quickness to get by some of the smaller wings that he might be matched up with on occasion, and he wasn't tough enough and strong enough to match some of the bigs that he would be facing. And so I felt like it would be a problem when he got to the college level. And it was part of that whole issue that was hard for him to make that adjustment. But we saw those flashes. We saw him score 21 points in a game. We saw him have huge stretches on both ends of the floor. So we saw his capabilities.
And made big time physical plays or effort plays. So, that was there, but I think your point about physicality should be well taken. And just because he's not as thick, he's not as fully developed as an athletic body as a lot of the guys he was being matched up with. So yep. I think that most people, reasonable people, would agree with your assessment, having watched him play for a year. And with the idea that he is coming back, it's become obvious that to one degree or another, you were correct in that assessment.
And the thing is too with Matthew Hurt, and I like this. I mean, he's a guy that, from all accounts, I've heard he's works hard in practice. Cassius Stanley again spoke about him as well in that same press conference, and he said, "Look, he knows now what he's got to get better at and what he needs to work on between now and next season." And that's the key. What's the point in coming back if you're not going to improve on those areas that you've learned are deficiencies? And if Matthew Hurt does that, I think what we'll start to see is somebody start to realize that all that ability and promise that he showed as a recruit, that had so many people hyping him up. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, because like Trey Jones is a prime example. He's a guy that needed one more year. And what did we see? We saw a guy that turned into ACC Player of the Year.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
No, for sure. And you and I have mentioned this about Matthew Hurt before. So he's not Zion. That doesn't mean he's not good. It doesn't mean he can't be a historically good Duke basketball player, because Trey, you mentioned, stayed for the extra year and left his mark. I mean, he needs no more time to leave his mark on Duke basketball lore. There's a chance for Matthew Hurt to do something like that. And it's because he's going to be able to stay for this second year. There's a value in that. And especially in a world where you just don't get recruits to hang around for 4 years, whether they're NBA bound or not. It seems it's a hard thing to do, is keep a guy for his entire career. A second year is going to do Matthew Hurt a lot of good. And especially if, as we have predicted and did closer to the beginning of the show, if it's a similar setup schematically for Duke and there aren't any drastic changes, and Matthew can come in and do mostly what he was tasked with doing a year ago, then yeah, of course, the improvement is even going to be better than it would be with changing systems from year to year. Not that things change year to year that severely with a Mike Krzyzewski team anyway, but there's good reason to believe he's going to have a huge breakout as a sophomore. I'm with you.
Yeah, without a doubt. And one last thing on him, and we can move on, but the beauty with Matthew Hurt is he's got an advanced skill set. So coming in, like staying the next year, you don't have to so much worry about teaching him skills and working on his skill set and working on his basketball IQ and working on the fundamentals. Those are not the things you have to work on with him. The things you need to work on with him is get him stronger, get him tougher, get him more confident in himself. Get him playing smarter, but he's got the base to work with, which makes it so much better. We're not talking about a player that's coming in and doesn't know what in the world he's doing, and you've got to try to adjust his mentality and his game and all this stuff to the new college level. He's got all the tools to be successful. And I honestly, truly think he will, and we won't be talking about next year the things that he struggled with so much. We'll be talking about how he improved and how he flourished in year 2.
So let's move on to the new guys, because I think you provide a service that is geared for both people who are well aware of the new guys and others, more casual fans, lighter fans that might be not 100% sure what the Blue Devils have coming in, although it can be safely assumed it's going to be another good class. They're going to reload again. So Jalen Johnson's sort of the prize of this class. He's just a all-around achiever, swing player type guy that can make an immediate impact. And other than that, other than the obvious blanket statement of he's really good, what else do you see in Jalen?
Well, I had a chance to watch him a few times. I didn't get to see him as much as I have some other players over the years, but I did see him in at the USA Basketball, or maybe it was the NBA Top 100 camp. I get all these things confused. I go to so many different events.
Right. They all blend together. I get it.
So it's one thing. But point is what I love about Jalen Johnson is he's so smooth. And, when I think about smooth players, guys that I saw as recruits, I think about guys like Jabari Parker before he put on the weight that he put on when he came to Duke, because he was a little bit bigger than when he was a high school recruit. He was smooth. I used to compare him to like a Grant Hill, and maybe not from an athleticism standpoint, but just from how he played smooth type of game. And I look at Jalen Johnson that same way. He's athletic. He's not maybe off the charts athletic, but he is athletic. I mean, he's got bounce to him, and he can shoot the ball, and he can take guys off the dribble. But he's that perfect stretch four guy that Coach K loves to have. I mean, he recruits them every year. That's the centerpiece for his teams. Guys that can really make an impact facing up and be a four guy that can play around the rim as well. So I love Jalen Johnson from that standpoint. I'd like to see, it's hard for me to make a blanket kind of comment on maybe his motor and that kind of thing, but I'd like to see his consistency improve. When I was at the NBA Top 100 camp, I remember he was a little bit up and down, but that was one event. So that might not be the full story with him. So before anybody jumps down my throat saying, no, this guy's consistent, I'm just meaning from that one experience when I saw him. So that may not be an issue with him. But man, from what I've heard is he's better than people anticipate, and he's going to surprise a lot of people. So if there's that one guy that's going to kind of stand out, I think it's going to be Jalen Johnson.
We mentioned Jeremy Roach, the point guard already, and I think most expect him to settle in at starting point guard. Is he that good? Is he safely that good? Maybe his floor is even better than that of Johnson's?
Yeah, I love Jeremy Roach. From the first time I saw him back when he was a sophomore, I loved this guy. And he ended up, he had an injury between his junior and senior year. He didn't get to play a stretch. So when I was at USA Basketball back in October, he was there and he participated in workouts, but he was only about 95% healed from his injury, so he didn't play in games. But long before that, like, the thing with Jeremy is he's such a strong kind of bulldog mentality. He's not that bulldog type player, but he's got that mentality. He's really aggressive. He's got great vision, can find his teammates. He's really a guy that can facilitate that offense. So I think when you think about what you lose with Trey Jones, sure, Jeremy Roach is not going to be able to fill that hole by himself, but nobody was going to be able to do that. But Jeremy is going to be able to close that gap a lot more than maybe most other point guards that you would see in the class. And the other thing, and we saw this with him this past season during his high school season when he was able to start playing, he is so explosive. People think about him as this guard, but he will attack the basket, and he will dunk on anybody. And so I think that's the difference between him and Trey Jones, is there's that explosive aspect to Jeremy Roach's game. And defending, he will be aggressive. He will be in guys' faces. He might not be quite the defender Trey Jones was, but again, he's not going to be a liability from that standpoint. So he's absolutely good enough to be a guy that can just step right in and be an impact player.
Nice. All wonderful stuff from your fearless leader, publisher, and editor, Brian McLawhorn. Man, you gave me free reign to steer the ship, and that's all I've got. So I think with that, we'll put a bow on this episode, let you get it up and get it fed to the ravenous Duke fans who have nothing better to do than consume more and more Duke content as they sit at home. But again, he's Brian McLawhorn. I'm Daron Vaught. Thanks for joining us on the Devils Illustrated podcast video edition, quarantine edition, whatever you want to call it. Maybe we'll do another one of these. I don't know, B. We might. Depends on how long this goes on. Anyways, Brian, I bid thee adieu. Talk to you next time.
Likewise. Good to see you.